So we're back on another episode, and this time it's going to be talking to men about the male menopause, or andropause, as it's better known as. And I'm thinking that we can't really neglect the boys. It'd be very rude to not actually mention it. And I think it's also a thing that's really not actually addressed or spoken about. So I invited today a very good friend of mine, Paul Ehren, who is a personal trainer, coach, nutrition advisor. We talk all things hormones, etc. He's also a multi-titled bodybuilder. And I will hand it over to you, Paul, because you will put into words much better what you do and your background.
Well, we'll try. Thanks very much indeed, Claire. So just to give you 5 minutes of my background, I had a career in the City of London, which took me up to nearly 40 years of age. And by which time I just started to compete at that time, which I know is, a strange sort of competing profile, because most people will probably start early. But I started as a senior athlete. And after 15 years or so in the city, and I could see what way things were going, and that, and probably what was a midlife crisis, which probably meant I either did something drastic work-wise or bought a Harley Davidson and cruised the west coast of America or something. So push came to shove in the city and I was made redundant. And I then started to think, do I really want to drive a desk for the rest of my days? And the answer to that was no. So I'd always trained. I'd done judo, other martial arts. I got more into weight training through that. So I trained for a long time. I just started to give people a little bit of ad hoc advice. And I thought, that's really what I want to do. So I took a chunk of my redundancy money, 6 months of my life, and went back to uni, got qualified, came out with all the appropriate certificates. And then obviously the hard work starts. You've got your qualifications, but you haven't got any clients. So that's all of that came in. So I've been running my own exercise, lifestyle, nutrition consultancy. Well, I'll say I was 40 when I started, so well over 20 years now. And at the same time, as I say, I really jumped into the competitive side of bodybuilding. So without really boring you senseless on that, I was fortunate enough to become British champion. I was second on a couple of occasions, third on another occasion. I've got a fair collection of regional titles. And the same as Claire, I was lucky enough to compete internationally as well. So all of that, as I say, as a senior athlete. I'm still doing exactly the same job. COVID really brought an end to my competitive career, which at the age of 60, without doubt, was on its last knockings anyway. But, bodybuilding is one of these things that you can carry on for a long time. But with the whole COVID situation, I thought, well, there's not going to be any shows for at least a year or two. And do I really want to put my immune system through what I know I would have to put it through with all of these viruses around? And obviously at the time, nobody knew whether it was going to be the Black Death or whether it was going to be something somewhat less. So I've been retired now a couple of years. And really much the same as Claire, I would hazard to guess. I started off really as a sportsman and immersed in bro science, and gradually taught myself the actual science from there. So you find a lot of people, particularly in our industry, who are extremely well qualified, who are wonderful scientists, they've never actually had a client, or they've never actually dealt with human beings. So dealing with it the way that, as I say, both me and Claire have, we've grown up with people, we've found what works, we've been at the coal mine of all of this, and actually, the blood, sweat and vomit of competitive sports. And then we've
Literally.
added, yeah, and we've added to that the science as we've gone along. So I think we've got a lovely mix of the practical together with the academic. And one of the organisations that I belong to, the Centre of Integrated Sports Nutrition, I think that's what they love about me, because I'm never going to be their best scientist. But I was talking to the guy that actually runs it, who hopefully we will, in fullness of time, actually get into this podcast. Very, very clever guy. And I was talking to him about one of his lecturers, or another one of his lecturers. And I was saying, this particular lady, incredible scientist. She can talk for hours about cellular pathways and this, that, and the other. And I said, I'll never be that scientist, Ian. And he said, Paul, you've got to remember, she's never had a client. She's never actually dealt with a person. And I think that's, without blowing our own trumpet too much, I think that's sort of what sets me and Claire apart a little bit, that we've got reasonable science behind us. We've also got a very good sort of backup team there of all the various people, loads of different, and I talk about a lot, something that I've written about in the past called the palette of many colours. And again, you know, Claire started off on the physical side of things and learnt the nutrition, learnt the science from there in the same way as I have. And I think it's important to actually have that mix. It's something we discussed the other day, Claire, that you come across a lot of people who are very specialised in one particular subject, and they miss out an awful lot by not being able to tap in to some of the other things.
So with our sport as well, it's sort of like, you know, move sort of like when we look at the hormonal health, obviously hormonal health within bodybuilding has to come into it. And then again, with us both being of a certain age, Paul a little bit more senior than me, obviously, but the looking at the, sorry, I've just got to let my dog out. Hang on, sorry. Go on.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, I have a poorly hound. She's a bit under the weather today. Yeah, sorry. And then we're looking at the hormonal health, and obviously we always think about hormones, and we link it more to the female. The female of the species, and actually we've within the menopause stuff as well, haven't we? So it's like what we were talking about, Paul, was when we were talking about menopause, we haven't actually addressed what goes on with the male system. And I think also what we were looking at as well, it's like when we say about the not acknowledging it within Parliament, that the female menopause, and then I thought, well, and it's like what we were saying, actually, we haven't actually addressed the men. So, so again, we're actually discriminating a little bit there.
I think this leads me on nicely, the way that I was actually going to start off this presentation by saying that I think we're in a position with the male menopause, andropause, call it what you will, that we were with the female menopause maybe 10 years ago. So, you know, I've got good girlfriends prescribed antidepressants as the absolute 101 of having menopause. And it was only when years after that, and I mean, they were on antidepressants for 4 or 5 years. And it was only after that that they actually discovered the bioidentical hormone replacement and the whole myth that every woman's going to get breast cancer if she starts HRT was actually put to one side. And we've now got a completely different view on menopause, female menopause. But no one really acknowledges the male side of things. And the problem with that, and as I say, this is where I'm really going to start this. This leads us into two main problems, as I see it. Your average GP has got as much idea on the endocrine system generally as I about taking flights to the moon. You know, going to the GP about your hormones. They're a bit better these days. A female GP will probably have a bit better idea. But, you know, they're not, and it's probably not their fault. They know a small amount about a lot of things. They know very little about general things in depth. And this leaves it wide open. So in conventional medicine, you'll go along to your GP and you might talk to him. You might have heard this phrase, andropause, and he'll probably deny that it even exists. And that then opens up the other side of things. You put in, just spend 2 minutes, type in testosterone boosters into Google, and you will have page after page after page of nonsense coming up. But, you know, for a lot of these people, and this is what worries me about some of the male health clinics as well, that, you know, there's been an influx of male health clinics all of a sudden. And it's such an easy sale. If you can tell a guy that he's going to be stronger, he's going to smash the competition at work, and he's going to be an absolute animal in the bedroom, that's a pretty easy sale.
Yeah.
So take this pill, this injection, rub this cream on, and all of a sudden, all of your woes completely disappear.
And I suppose at least the women's side of it is heavily regulated, a lot more regulated.
Well, apart from the bioidenticals, the body identicals are regulated, but the bio.
But the bio isn't, is it? The body is, which is the ones that I'm on. And I think as well I think as well, again, it's probably within male health as well. It's a bit of a postcode lottery. You may be very lucky. I mean, around here, there isn't anything for the female. So if there's nothing for the female, I doubt there's anything for the male side of it.
No, absolutely. And that sort of leaves us down another complete rabbit hole, in as much as, once again, I'm talking about online. Or anything that you want to actually online. If you probably typed in anabolic steroids, you could probably have all sorts of sources actually coming through, which is dangerous beyond belief, because these things, they're very, very readily available. I would imagine that many gyms in the country, you'd only have to walk in and anyone would be happy to actually provide you with this, that.
It's like now a lot of people within gyms are doing that sort of thing. So just sort of moving yourself onto the sort of like the health side of it. Do you think it's a little bit like with females as well? It's like with males, the healthier you are by the time you hit 50 and the more lean muscle tissue you're carrying, the less body fat we're carrying, that's going to have a huge impact on the whole, on a positive hormonal profile.
So if we can maybe just take a step back, and for the people watching, may not be completely au fait with everything, maybe sort of like 5 minutes on what is testosterone. Let's just.
I was going to say, actually, if we just talk a little bit about what is andropause, because we know that women have cycles monthly and over a lifetime of these hormones. What happens if we just clarify what happens to men?
Okay,
and also, what are those symptoms of andropause? What are we really talking about?
So if we go back to the sort of like 101, then testosterone, primary sex hormone, and anabolic steroid in males. Now, as we know, it's not exclusively male in the same way as estrogen is not exclusively female. We're looking at a balance of all of these. But if people start talking about male hormones, then testosterone is going to be the one which is sort of like thought about. And there's two primary types of effects that is going to have. One is androgenic and one is anabolic. The anabolic one, obviously, it's got all the connotations to misuse in sports, but effectively, that's going to provide a man with more muscle mass, generally, than a woman, more bone density, more bone strength. And then if we start, there will be other things as well, probably more red blood cells. And then if we look at the androgenic, then it's going to be growth of the sex hormones, hair growth and hair loss in some cases, depending on levels, and of the voice. So these are all of the things that it's actually going to affect. And as it starts to sort of like fade away, or if you have too much, then we can start to get some weird and wonderful things actually happening. Now, testosterone, the same as all of the other steroid hormones, is manufactured from cholesterol. Cholesterol is your building block of all these steroid hormones. So cholesterol generally is at a very, very bad rap. And we could do another complete podcast on cholesterol.
Yeah.
Because HDL, LDL, I'll throw in now, I'll just
the LDL.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave that one. You know, we need cholesterol for every single cell in our body. But as I say, that's for another discussion. So it comes from cholesterol. So we actually manufacture testosterone and all the other sort of like steroid hormones from cholesterol. And then we need to actually get it traveling around the body. Now, it doesn't actually fit well into blood and the water in blood. So it needs transporters to take around the body. At 95% of testosterone is bound to something called sex hormone binding globulin. And another 4 or 5% is bound to another protein called albumin. That's what transports it around the body. And if you get a reading from your doctor of total testosterone, that is what it is. It is total testosterone. It won't look at the amount that is bound and that is unbound, because it is only the unbound testosterone that can actually attach to the receptor site and do all the weird and wonderful things that testosterone does. So there's something called free testosterone, or the free androgen index, I've heard it described as. So you've got to be quite careful. If you, again, just go to your GP and ask for a testosterone test, you've got to be careful what you have come back. And with a lot of GPs, it's going to come down to cost. They don't want to do these tests. And the typical answer you're going to get is, why do you want that done? What's wrong with you? Well, nothing's wrong with me at the moment, doctor, but I want to make sure that nothing is going to be wrong with me. And a lot of them take an awful lot of persuading to do a proper, I could say about most of them, thyroid tests. Me and Claire have spoken about sort of that.
So if they missed on the, and you don't get the free testosterone, so what age would you say that you probably want to start looking at it? And again, then we're getting into the whole symptoms of what is happening. So what age would testosterone?
Yeah, I think that unless
commonly, as we know, menopause happens at very different stages in life, but the same for men. What age? Well,
I think you're going to, unless you're actually having problems and you're thinking, I think this is a good idea to actually have this tested. So that could be, and we'll come on to how it's difficult to use just one test to diagnose any particular, because it could be a number of different things that are actually going on.
Yeah, but I don't want to get too complex, because here we could go down a whole rabbit hole here. We start getting a little bit too scientific.
No, absolutely. All I really want to do on this is paint broad brushstrokes, and then people want to actually come back and actually say, I'd love to know a little bit more about this. I'd love to know more about that, or this something. Then we can start to actually dive into that. Now, just before we touch on what you were saying, so you've got this testosterone floating about. Now, your average male is produce something in the region of between 3 and 10 milligrams of testosterone a day, with an average of about 6. So an average male is producing 6 milligrams of testosterone a day. So again, if you relate that, so you're looking at something south of 70 milligrams, 60 milligrams a week, something like that. Now, if you think that a lot of the sportsmen are taking thousands of milligrams a week, where they're sort of misusing these things, you can understand why problems actually start to occur in some sportsmen. And if you relate that to a woman's production, it does vary a lot, but a woman could be producing even 20 times less. Now, a male will metabolize theirs a lot more. So a blood test on a woman probably show maybe about 10 times less, 8 times less. But those are roughly the sort of figures that we're talking about. But unless there was really a problem that was actually cropping up, so maybe depression, just to sort of like think of one, maybe loss of libido, because obviously if you take most of our fellas, as soon as the sex drive goes, then you're starting to think that something's wrong. So loss of libido, erectile dysfunction, and these are obvious things where guys are going to start thinking, oh, it's probably my testosterone. Well, as we'll come on to, it may or may not be.
It could be quite a few different reasons for that.
It could absolutely be a whole host of things. That's why self-diagnosis is never really a sort of great idea. So those are sorts of figures we're talking about. But unless there's a problem, I think most guys can quite happily go through to their 50s at least without really recognizing, because it's not the same as, and I think the scope that it actually reduces is so wide, depending on so many different factors that we will come on to, that it's not like a lot of you girls that things literally fall off a cliff.
We can be
sort of,
yeah.
And it's sort of like hot flush time. God knows, all the things that you're much more aware of than I am. The female side of things, I've found that on the male side of things, it's much, much more sort of gradual. Particularly as you get older, it could be put down to a number of sort of like different things. So that's what it is. That's where it comes from. That's how it's transported around the body. And those are roughly the amounts. Oh, and interestingly enough, I think when we start to speak about the onset of testosterone production, I think most people would think puberty. That's when it all sort of starts to happen. In actual fact, testosterone starts to have an effect when the fetus is still in the womb. And even in the first few weeks of a baby's birth, there's another little burst. So some women might find that their skin's a bit more oily or something, and that's down to testosterone production. But to all intents and purposes, to keep things nice, neat and tidy, it's obviously really puberty that we start to see these things. The male voice starts to go down, start to get hair in sort of like interesting places. All of a sudden, girls start to look quite interesting. All of the things that we're aware about. But as I say, puberty is the obvious, but as I say, it doesn't actually start with that. So if we could just look very, very quickly at the methods that actually go through, and Claire, you may have spoken about the various sort of axes in the body before with various hormones.
I've kept it very, very simple. We've had doctors on talking about the sort of the more complex stuff, but I don't want to get too scientific because people just
let's just hit it very, very quickly. Mainly, not exclusively, but mainly, you've got something called the HPG. Yes. Hypothalamus pituitary gonads.
Yeah.
And there's a feedback loop within that the brain will pick up whether the body needs more testosterone. The hypothalamus in the brain will activate the pituitary. That will throw out a particular releasing hormone, and that will go down in a couple of different ways. There's a couple of, there's LH and FSH, which we can go into at another time, which go down at the testes. one looks after sperm production, one looks after the production of testosterone. And if there's a problem, then we've got to be aware, and this is where self-diagnosis becomes difficult. We've got to be aware where the problem is. Is it in this first part, the hypothalamus pituitary? Is it in the sort of second part? There's a small amount of production that also takes place in the adrenals. And I think with women, I think they get, it's either the ovaries or the adrenals.
The adrenals have adrenals have got a big...
produces their testosterone. So men get a very small amount from the adrenals, but it's mainly that feedback loop which actually starts to kick in. Cofactors, so cholesterol is the absolute main one. Other cofactors, and if you really wanted to dive in, there's a lot, but vitamin D plays a really big part. You know, vitamin D is being flagged up on so many different things now, and it's being seen as a hormone in its own right rather than just a vitamin. The fatty acids, the omega fatty acids, are seen as a real big one, and very, very low fat diets can have an effect as well. Zinc, lack of zinc is seen as quite a big one. Vitamin A is seen as something, and they're linking creatine as well. To some form.
So would you say as well on things like that, because obviously the absorption and stuff as well, then you would again looking at what we were talking about with Claire Nisbet on gut health, which is going to be huge as well.
And also what we were saying about things starting in the brain, you know, talking about the whole zooming out and taking the bigger picture sort of view of where hormones really originate, where the releasing, the production, the management of hormones begin. And that's the same for men and women. It's in the brain.
Yeah, very much so. They're linking, and another one that I could have added to that list is fiber, and brings you round quite neatly to your gut health. And obviously they're linking so many. The more they look into gut health, you've got, you know, the gut brain axis, gut muscle axis, gut lung axis that's COVID. There's so many different things, and obviously, you know, they've found that so much of your serotonin is contained in the gut. So there is a huge crossover there, and I completely agree that gut health would absolutely be another area to actually to look at. Now, I know that Claire has got a link, just where I've got it in my notes. Claire has got a link on this to something that I mentioned to her the other day called the ADAM questionnaire.
I put it up on the page today.
And that's the androgen deficiency in aging males. It's 10 questions guys can have a look at, which will give them, and absolutely, we've got that problem with self-diagnosis there, but it will give them some idea, and I'll come on to it in a minute, but it's some of these things that may possibly actually be involved. Touching on that just very quickly, something like erectile dysfunction could actually be the warning signs for cardiovascular disease. So it might not be anything to do with testosterone whatsoever. It could build up of plaque in the arteries, restricting blood flow. And the thing that you really need to get checked out is cardiovascular health. So, you know, it's very, very dangerous for a guy just to assume, because he's having problems in that particular direction, that it is going to be a testosterone problem, because possibly taking testosterone would be the worst possible thing that he could actually sort of like do for it. So it's interesting. So you're absolutely right. We're looking at all of this in the round. We're not just looking at testosterone health. We're looking at estrogen health. We're looking at gut health. We're looking at absolutely everything, which really sort of brings me on probably to the points that you're going to want to major on. What are the things that can have the major effect on either optimizing testosterone production or inhibiting it?
Yeah.
So if we can just go through the list. If there's anything I've missed off of here, then please shout out.
Oh, I'll ask you loads of questions shortly, so to carry on.
Yeah, I'm saving them up. I'm saving them up.
Yeah, I'm like listing them up. You better be on the ball, Paul, because you know what I'm like.
We'll soon find out. So exercise can be a great plus, or it can be quite a big minus. On the plus, all need to be doing something. So if I substitute movement stroke activity for exercise, then I think that probably puts less people off. But we're made to move. We're not to park our ass on the sofa and just watch EastEnders. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to do the sorts of sessions that maybe me and Claire do down the gym, but it's got to be something. And this is where I spoke before about practitioners having a good idea of a lot of different modes of things. And I think a lot of nutritional therapists, for example, would do very well in learning a bit more about strength and conditioning. And a lot of strength and conditioning coaches could do very well by learning more about nutritional therapy, because there is obviously a massive crossover on all of these. But so we've got exercise, and once again, you've got the normal J curve, the same as on a lot of things, that none at all is not very good. A moderate amount, whatever you would classify as a moderate amount, is very good. An excessive amount starts to actually sort of become counterproductive. So the classic example of that, I've trained them, and I'm damn sure that Claire has as well. You've got an overreaching executive. He might be an accountant, he might be a solicitor, he might be whatever. He's working 12-hour days. And his idea of exercise is to go out and slay himself with 2 hours of CrossFit. Whereas maybe the best thing he could do is sit under a tree and have 30 minutes yoga. Because at the end of the day, exercise is another stress on the system. And the whole idea of stress generally is to introduce a small amount, hormesis, I think is the technical phrase, if I'm not mistaken. You introduce a small amount of stress, your body recovers from it, but it gets stronger because of it. But if you put too many stressors actually into the system, you're going to have very much negative effects.
So with with like over exercising, or high stress job, cortisol's raised and the stress hormones, and we can get into really technical. So having completely, I know the answer to it, but I'm just going to ask it. So having raised stress hormones, especially cortisol, what effect is that having on testosterone production?
Absolutely. You can, as sure as eggs is eggs, it's going to reduce it. You've got, I know it's quite a controversial subject, and this is starting to get a bit technical, but you've got something called a pregnenolone still.
Yeah, that's getting way too complicated, Paul.
Yeah, but
move on.
what that effectively means, the layman's answer to, or not the answer, the layman's overview of that would be your body is using all of its time and effort to produce stress hormones.
Yeah.
The old fight and flight or rest and digest. Everything's going towards stress hormones. Nothing is going towards the production of testosterone, or maybe some of the.
Although it has been shown that it's not a complete steal now, that there is. They are going down both paths, but there's just more going down.
Yes.
But again, if your cortisol's elevated, your blood glucose is elevated.
Yes. And that's stressful in itself for the body to deal with.
Yeah, because I had a bad night's sleep the other night, and now my blood glucose, as we know, is usually 3.4, never any more than 5. It was 6, because that was one bad night's sleep. So if people are not sleeping, especially in menopause for females or perimenopause, whatever, that is a huge impact and negative impact on the body. So if a guy is going in and slaying himself in the gym.
Yeah. Or on the other flip side, I think a lot of the time, you forget you're the minority. You're looking after yourselves. You've got that whole history of the strength training, that it's not just a sport or a pastime for you. That's been your passion, your drive. For the majority of people. Family, job is their thing, and the exercise drops off, and we don't do enough. I'm kind of in that as well, but a lot of men don't do enough exercise. So how does that affect testosterone levels?
That will affect so many different things. All the things that we're talking about here, we could swap the title of this and have a discussion about Alzheimer's. And all these things that we're going to be talking about are going to be having an effect on there as well. And, sort of health generally. So, we're talking about hormones, but we could be talking about a whole range of things. The good news is with exercise, it is never, ever too late.
No.
So there's good research out there that's taken people in their 90s and started them on a strength program. Obviously,
it was a squat one, wasn't it? Got some really positive.
Yeah. You're not taking them down to the gym and asking them to squat 300 pounds, but body weight
squat.
Can of beans.
My dad's not going to be doing that.
No. But again, like what we were saying with the women, it doesn't need to be a lot. Your minimum effective dose could be 15 minutes.
Absolutely. And
with body weight stuff,
you get the most benefit from it. Me and Claire are going to have to work bloody hard to get a positive effect, because we've been doing it for so long. If you take an average, whatever an average 50-year-old is, 60-year-old, that 15 minutes that Claire just spoke about is going to have a massive effect, because you're starting from a very low base. And if you just start to look at some of the stats, again, I know we're going slightly off subject here, but some of the stats, if you can just get someone a little bit stronger, a little bit more stable, and stop them from falling over, the stats of people going into hospital with hip breaks over the age of 60, and the percentage who die within a year is absolutely terrifying.
And I think the more muscle, and again, the more muscle mass you have, okay, I'm not, we're not asking you to be Mr. Atlas or something like that, but the more stable you are. And I think a very good statement that Peter Attia made was that he's playing a game. Whoever, if you don't know Peter Attia, Dr. Peter Attia, great oncologist, now does a lot of studies on longevity and stuff like that. What he's saying is he's playing the centenarian Olympics, but what he's saying is you better damn well hope you are an above average 50-year-old to be good at 80. And I thought that's a really, really good point that he makes. And again, I'm not saying barring illness, we all get stuff, but the more muscle mass that we can accumulate into our 50s, and it gives us a better chance, because I think people haven't realized that the muscle is an organ, and it actually regulates an awful lot of stuff.
And it's a very, very metabolic active hormone. Same way as fat. Fat is metabolically active in a very negative way. Whereas muscle, you've got an awful lot of, again, I know this is getting a little bit deep, but we've got an awful lot of anti-inflammatory cytokines being produced by muscle. And so, just trying to just address that, just start to move. It hasn't got to be much, but if there's any advice that I can give any of those average 50, 60-year-olds, approach someone who's got an idea of what to do and start something. That 15 minutes a day that Claire spoke about, You don't need weights, body weight, exercise bands, cans of beans, you know, what to actually get things started. So, you know, there's a great science behind doing some exercise, but for the reasons that we've mentioned, not so great if you're really driving yourself into the ground.
Mm.
That 50-year-old with erectile dysfunction who is working 12 hours a day and then slaying himself in the gym every night, he might want to look at those areas, because all of those stressors, just touching on it very briefly while I think about it, cold water immersion is very much in favour at the moment. But again, bear in mind, it's a stressor. And the idea of cold water immersion is just to add a little bit of stress to the body that you will recover from. If you're that guy working 12 hours a day, doing 2 hours of CrossFit, then jumping in an ice bath, I would suggest that's not the greatest of ideas that we're doing, because it's just stressor after stressor after stressor. Mate, you need to take a chill pill and, as I say, sit under a tree and smoke some dope or something.
So with the hormonal health and stuff like that, so you know, and again, I suppose us women probably need to be a little bit more understanding of guys that they're going to be going through, you know, the confidence crisis. They've hit a certain age, and we need to understand that. And I think, you know, I think at the minute the media is putting such a highlight on us that we're forgetting about the guys, and I think, you know, we've got to do that.
Well,
but I think also
in a similar way, Claire, social media is just as full of henched looking guys.
Yeah.
It is with really fit women with backside.
Yeah, they don't look like that. It's filters. They didn't have full filters back in my day.
So everyone's got such a warped idea of what normal is these days. So there's a lot of guys, there's a lot, probably not so much the older ones, but the really susceptible ones, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds out there, think they should be looking like Dwayne Johnson and can't understand.
I wouldn't complain.
Yeah.
But no, I'm just thinking, so sort of like going back to the sort of the andropause sort of thing, and sort of like the estrogenic effect. So if we started to look at the nutrition, because again, being overweight or obese shuts down the testosterone, doesn't it? So
that's the second on my list, is diet. Absolutely. And it can have a massive plus or a massive minus actually effect. And I think, just to keep things as simple as possible, where I would start with that is, just as much as you can, eat a good all-round healthy diet. I wouldn't go down too many rabbit holes unless you've got specific problems. And obviously your keto diet is very much a case in point there, Claire. You know, you introduced it for a very specific reason. And, you know, it works very well. But I've got clients who have used a vegan diet, which I know Claire has got her views on. And
I couldn't possibly comment.
And again, it's worked for them. Now, whether it's long term, but I think the starting point on all of this, it's all of the classic things that we've heard. Eat a rainbow. Don't eat processed food. You know, and for the vast majority of people, eating as much organic food as you can afford, staying away from processed food, staying away from prepackaged food, staying away from sugar, limit your alcohol content or consumption, and don't smoke. That's going to get you 80% of the way. And with alcohol, I don't mind with my clients if they have a drink. Now, I'm not talking about having a bottle of wine every night, but would I rather have my clients having a couple of glasses of wine a couple of times a week and having a little bit of a laugh and a joke and sort of de-stressing, or would I rather have them sitting there watching EastEnders being miserable? I would rather them having that release of stress thing every time. So diet, immense plus, very, very big minus, depending how you do it. And as I would start off with, let's keep this simple. So, as I say, good plant-based diet, But personally, I would absolutely be including quality animal protein within that. Eat the rainbow, limit your processed food, limit your pre-packaged food to an absolute minimum, 0 if you can. And you're going to be pretty much on the route. Third one I've got down is, we've mentioned it before, is sleep. Again, massively important. And again, linked to so many different things, whether it's hormonal health, whether it's neurodegenerative health, absolute myriad of things. Try and get that 7 hours a night, or you can. Now, I know there's always going to be outliers on that. And when I start mentioning that, then the name that always crops up is, what about Margaret Thatcher? Margaret Thatcher only had 4 nights. Yeah, but what did Margaret Thatcher die with?
Yeah. So did you? Well, it's probably slightly different, sort of like in the sport that you did, but with any of your sort of male friends and that, did they? Is it something that guys would ever talk about? Which we know men never talk about feelings and how they are and stuff like that. But is it something, again, in the job that you do men talk about the confidence?
Some do, some don't. It's much an individual thing. I saw one guy today, and he can't bloody stop talking about it.
He's in touch with his feminine side.
Too much information.
Well, again, I suppose at least there's talking about it, and there's probably been a little bit too open about it, maybe.
Yeah, I think his situation is that he hasn't got too many people, apart from some of the medical professionals that he uses. He hasn't got too many mates fighting.
But then would you guys go and sit down at the, like us girls, it's like that thing, we get the mental health thing because we talk, because it's a thing that, even me, you and Kelly, when we're on a call, we sort of like, we ask each other how each other are, or even in our chat, don't we? Oh, how's things with you? And, and if you're having a really bad day, you go, terrible.
Yeah, I think there's sort of stratas, there's layers of this, Claire. I think talking about how you feel is one thing. I'm having a shit day.
Yeah.
This particular guy that I'm talking about, he may well watch this podcast at some point in the future. So I'm certainly not going to mention any names. But every so often he'll send me a text early in the morning, and it's like, Paul, I'm really sorry, I can't get out of bed today. I just literally cannot get out of bed. I can't make the gym. So at that level, and a lot of guys will go that far. Not all of them suffering the same way as he does, but they will tell you, it's not particularly great day, I'm not training very well today. How far they'll take that down the line, particularly to sexual performance, is another matter. Because particularly in certain environments, everyone's got to be a sexual monster. And if you're actually admitting to something less than that.
Yeah. So the chances of a guy actually going to their GP and actually going, I'm not in a good place. And then again, if they're overweight, and again, if we're looking at a guy I was training, and he was quite open about it. He was overweight. He'd aromatized, he got gynecomastia. So for people that are watching this, so he's got softness around the breast tissue basically growing. And we made huge changes to his diet. Now the gynecomastia isn't going to disappear, but just make him really, really simple diet, upping his protein, doing the exercise, sleep. Within 4 months, the change was huge, and it was nothing fancy.
Absolutely. Talking of the gyno, because testosterone, and this is what a lot of sportsmen have found, testosterone can and will convert to estrogen. Now, that is not a great idea. There's obviously, you've got the enzyme aromatase, and if you start kicking that off to any great extent, you will have exactly the situation that Claire described. And
he wasn't using anything naughty. It was,
no.
Yeah, so maybe explain to people what actually obesity does to the hormone balance.
3 of the main drivers of that aromatase, so 3 of the main drivers of the enzyme converting testosterone to estrogen, which in a guy is going to do exactly all the things that you're saying.
And probably a lot more.
And probably a lot more, absolutely. Will be excessive alcohol intake, obesity, and insulin.
Mm-hmm.
Insulin will drive, and this is, we're starting to join dots here. I know this is a massive conversation, but Claire spoke about her glucose levels after having a bad night's sleep. So all of a sudden, by having that bad night's sleep, you pushed your insulin levels up. That in itself can start to drive this aromatase and conversion of testosterone to estrogen. The same as a lot of other things, but those are the 3 sort of like main drivers.
And just to throw a spanner in the works, does the opposite to women.
Yeah.
So we get so for the people that are watching this, then we get the opposite. So if we look at potentially PCOS,
yes,
a girl that I trained a long time ago, this is quite funny. So sorted slim, PCOS, slim, been told she couldn't have children. She'd been trying, well, she hadn't really bothered. She was neither, but she said, I need to sort my diet out. Sugar junkie. I mean, beautiful, stunning figure. You know, that like you want to look like that. And changed her diet. And then 2 months later, she comes in, she went, I'm pregnant. And she went, it's your fault. And I went, I wasn't there.
No,
not guilty. Yeah, she ended up, because we changed her diet. And I mean, I've never seen anybody consume as much sugar. I mean, I'm looking at this nutrition, I'm like, yeah. So, and again, but it goes to show the effect that diet can have on PCOS and stuff like that. And we did low carb sort of thing.
Yeah. Sugar's a really interesting one because you can have so much hidden. I always remember a client of mine saying, Paul, I just cannot lose weight. I can't lose weight. So I said, okay, well, just give me an idea of your diet. And he was a tea junkie. 12, 14 cups of tea a day. 3 teaspoonfuls of sugar in each cup. Like, whoa, Steve. And he's a very, very clever man. He's a professor of English architecture. Very clever guy. Not so much on his nutrition.
God. Wow.
Let's work the math out here, Steve. 5 grams per teaspoon, give or take, depending on the size of your teaspoons. 3 teaspoons in each cup. 14 cups of tea every day. Let's just work that through. 4 calories a gram. So you're probably having an extra day's calories.
It's poor pancreas.
Yeah. Just, you know, regardless of the other effects that is actually sort of happen. And for a lot of people, that passes them by. Now, okay, now let's add on those couple of cheeky eclairs that I see cropped up for Sunday tea and a few other bits and pieces. And you're starting to get into scary numbers.
Yeah.
It never ceases to amaze me with the amount of information that is out there on diet, how you've really got to explain things. It shouldn't surprise me.
So if there was something that you would say that was an instant fix, because I'm just conscious of time, is an instant fix for guys to address. So say, and it didn't have an effect. So say, give your diet advice first, then your nutrition advice. If things aren't functioning or they're not, or the moods haven't changed, the energy levels haven't changed, who would you go to see?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is always a problem. I think that you've got to be working. I think the likes of me and you have got to be careful. If we're not working with at least the agreement of a doctor, sort of got our arse on the line.
Yeah.
To a large extent. We can't go against, let's take this guy that I was actually talking about. If he came into me and said, oh, my GP has told me to do this, that, and the other and take that. If I tell him not to, potentially I've got a huge problem.
Yeah, which we wouldn't do anyway, you know.
No, so what I would tend to do is, okay, you're speaking to your doctor, great. You've opened up some channels there. Let me just give you some questions to ask. And absolute classic, nothing to do with this.
Yeah, but what would you tell your client if let's take the doctor out of it? Okay, that's because we can't interfere with that.
Yeah,
what would you do with diet?
All the stuff that we've spoken about. Address your exercise. If you're not doing any, do some. And as a exercise, let's make that activity movement. If you want to have a deep dive into it, speak to someone like Claire, speak to someone like myself. Let's get moving, even if it's a walk around the block. That's a start. You know, we're starting to actually get ourselves moving. Address the diet. Cut out all of your pre-packaged processed foods as far as you can. Cut the sugar down to the minimum. Eat as much organic goodies as you can. That rainbow on a plate. Just all of the basics.
Would you advise, so with sort of protein, because we know as we get older, our protein absorption goes down and it can go extremely low. As a rule of thumb, do you have a sort of like, you know, whereas I use let's say I'm 60 kilos, 120 pound of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So I usually have about 110, 120 grams of protein.
Start to explain that to people. I would look at their eyes and see if they're starting to glaze over. You know, as soon as we're starting to talk about grams per kilogram body weight, and then they've got to weigh the foods that they're actually having and convert that. Good idea, but as long as they're having that sort of like palm-sized piece of chicken, or
I tend to use hand sizes. That's quite useful. Yeah.
At least they're getting something in, and then you can start in it a bit sort of like further down.
You see, I get geeky people come to me that want to know exactly.
Oh, some of mine, it's like, don't tell me why, just tell me what to do.
Yeah, and the majority of people aren't going to be wanting to build body mass and go into competitions and get PBs.
No, but Claire is absolutely right.
Got to be able to do.
Well, they need to build body mass. Lean body mass is important. We need to tone.
But a lot of people aren't going to be thinking that as being top priority.
I always word it toning to ladies because it's a nice, polite way, and it's a nice, non-intimidating way to say building muscle.
One of the real big things that I've found, which ties in very neatly with the protein intake, people's tastes change over the years. I've seen it with my mum. I'm now seeing it with my mother-in-law. All they want to eat is sweet things. They've gone they're all reverting back to childhood. And now my mum died in her mid-90s. Now, am I going to start making my mum's life a misery for the last few years of her life by taking all of the trifles away, letting her to try and eat 3 veg and it's not going to happen.
No.
When she was eating. Now, there's a big difference between that situation and their 50s.
My mum hasn't. She's actually gone off sweet food because she gets hot flushes in her 70s on sweet food.
Right.
She's not watching this. She'll be back with me.
I've seen it in a number of occasions, and I've seen the science that people's tastes do tend to change, and there you're really going to struggle to keep on sort of like top of things. So as far as you can, then address that. Well-being, stress, no quick fix. You've just got to be aware of it and work at those things gradually. Where is the stress coming from? Is it your home life? Is it your work life? is it all these little things that we've spoken about before? So be aware of it. Estrogen producing chemicals. Now, we're bombarded by, whether it's stuff, I suppose, guys in general are not quite as hot on cosmetics and that as a woman would be. But, there's still plenty of stuff around there.
Yeah, the xenoestrogens and stuff.
Yeah, they're talking about finding xenoestrogens in drinking water.
Yeah, and so drinking plenty of water. So we'll probably ought to stop it, otherwise we're going to this will keep going on. So if there was something that we haven't spoken about without getting too complicated, and that you think that guys would massively benefit from, or that we haven't covered. I mean, we could have, the thing is, we probably should have specialised on one thing, and that should be maybe nutrition. Yeah,
we've spoken about everything that I wanted to speak about.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like in part. We've done all the real important ones. We've done exercise, we've done what testosterone is, how it works. We've touched on exercise, done diet, we've done sleep, spoken about well-being, spoken about stress, chemicals, alcohol consumption, obesity. Those are the real sort of like main drivers. The questionnaire that you're putting up will give a lot of information for people. Should I be thinking about this? But as I say, the flip side of that is be careful not to self-diagnose. Speak to someone like ourselves who knows a bit more about it, because the fact
what I might do is look up sound out a couple of those guys on who to go to test, because again, there's private menopause clinics, but it's actually finding
some of the ladies that I have in my little black book of who to refer to. I've got some, they tend to be ladies who do the testing and looking at hormones as a whole. They are able to look at men's testing as well, and whether that's Dutch test or a blood test or whatever, they're able to do that.
Because Claire does Dutch testing, doesn't she? So
it's got to be GP as the first point of call.
Because like I say, for ladies' hormones, even my GPs won't test testosterone.
Yeah, but what you were saying in the beginning is totally correct, that this might not be a testosterone issue.
No,
absolutely. There are so many things. Your GP is always going to want to save money, and when we're having glucose tested, it's okay having fasting glucose and hemoglobin AC1 tested. What about insulin levels?
Yeah,
your GP test insulin levels, but the other two could be normal.
Yeah.
But your body's pumping out shed loads of insulin to keep up. You've got problems.
Huge.
And they're just looking to save money in the here and now.
And which is understandable. It's a business. They can't afford to do it. They're not in help. And I think it's upon us, ourselves, not us to tell everybody, but as an individual, it's our health is our responsibility to an extent to do the best by it. As Peter Attia said, the centenarian Olympics. I would be here another 50 years to annoy people.
Oh, me too. 100%. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, that there's a lot of crossovers here with what we've already talked about for women with menopause, that although we're really focusing in here the conversation around testosterone and looking at that as a decline, a slightly different type of decline, that it's a very small decline for men, and not all men are going to experience that in the same way. The factors that are contributing to that and influencing how a guy might experience it, whether it might be depression, anxiety, libido issues, how they look, how they feel in themselves, that's going to vary per individual. But the factors that help all of that, it still comes down to lifestyle, doesn't it? It still really is the major takeaway from this whole conversation. I think that it's still
absolutely. I I think the two major takeaways, probably from a male's point of view, is exactly what you just said, Angie. You've got to look after your own lifestyle, and then be careful of people trying to sell you things. A lot of, for the reasons that I said, first of all, it's very easy sale to say, take this pill, do what I'm sort of saying, you'll suddenly become 30 years of age again. So, there's an awful lot of people out there who are not looking after your best interests. So you've got to take it on yourself and try and sort of follow a route that's not going to lead you too far down. Like that. Well, but absolutely, lifestyle.
So anyway, I've got to thank you, Paul, because otherwise we could go on and I could go down a whole rabbit hole of testosterones and free testosterones and thyroid.
We could carry on this conversation. I think even when we speak to each other on the phone normally, I think we get away with less than 2 hours. So
So anyway, I will let you go, and I will catch up with you shortly. And I'm just going to stay on with Angie quickly, and I'll catch up with you this evening.
Yeah, great.
I will stop recording now.